A record number of voters are casting ballots in Georgia's two Senate runoff races. These races will determine the balance of power in the Senate and will determine how successful the Biden-Harris administration will be in its first 2 years. One of the biggest stories from the 2020 presidential election was the flip of Georgia from red to blue. Mr. Biden became the first Northern Democrat to win the Peach State since President Kennedy, a win that was partially attributed to the state's changing demographics. Among the citizens boosting turnout in the Senate races are Asian Americans and Pacific Islander voters. Joining me now to discuss this is Chen. She is the executive director of the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote Organization, also known as APIA Vote. Thanks for joining us. Your organization co-sponsored a poll which found 1 in 5 AAPI voters were newly registered. How does that number of new voters compare to 2016, and what effect do you think it might have on this Senate runoff race?
Yeah, what we saw from the November general elections was excitement, which really translated into historic turnout, but also early voting turnout. We saw the impact nationally where 5% more APIs casted a ballot than those who voted in the entirety in 2016. And specifically, it was the same way in Georgia. We saw that the API voter participation grew over the 2016 rates by 63%. Now, we had over 80,000 new voters added to the voter rolls in the last 4 years. And just this fall in November, with over 31,000 voting for the first time. So, building upon the success, we have many API nonprofits and political PACs who are looking to turn out these new voters and continue to re-energize this growing base of voters. And, that we see that some of the parties and campaigns are starting to recognize that more Hispanic and Asian voters register than their overall share of the electorate, which grew up to 5% this past November.
Well, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is of South Asian descent. Has her success inspired the AAPI community? Has it affected the voters that you have trying to register?
It has. I mean, having her on the ticket was provide the attention. We know that anytime an Asian American and Pacific Islander candidate runs for office, that increase their attention and participation rate. But at the same time, we cannot take API voters for granted. Although, according to our survey, over 2/3 voted for Biden or were supporting Biden and Harris, but 31% do not identify with either party. So capturing their vote and their support will really depend on the local candidate's relationship with the voter and organizing and providing immediate solutions around issues such as healthcare access, the COVID response and relief. Particularly with the Korean community, there's a large small business community. And so they're looking for leadership in this COVID response and also overall seeing whether or not leadership in this campaign embraces diversity. Also, with over 76% of the community being immigrants, I think it's really important to note that culturally appropriate language-specific outreach is also a necessity.
Well, Christine, some Asian American congressional leaders have criticized Mr. Biden's cabinet pick so far, saying that it does not look like, despite his claims of diversity and having a very diverse cabinet, that there will not be an Asian American secretary. New York Representative Grace Meng accused Democrats of taking AAPI voters for granted. Do the voters involved in your organization feel recognized and appreciated and, in fact, courted by either party?
I mean, right now we are currently outraged in the fact that there's no APIs that have been appointed at the secretary level. We are still very hopeful that they are looking at Julie Su as Secretary of Labor. But I believe that, if they're able to do that even before the Tuesday race, that could really help energize the Georgia API voters in getting motivated, knowing that they need a Senate that will be endorsing and supporting the administration's efforts, not only on appointments, but also in terms of issues that we actually care about.
Well, politicians and, in fact, members. Sorry, Christine. I was going to say that that when we're talking about Asian American Pacific Island voters, it's interesting that so often politicians and even members of the media often make the mistake of lumping ethnic groups into voting blocs and ascribe to them voting characteristics just because of their ethnicity or heritage. I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how politically diverse the AAPI electorate is and what candidates should remember when courting these voters.
Yes, the community is quite diverse in terms of ethnicity, in terms of language, and even their history with the United States as being immigrants. But when it comes to issues, they actually, actually land quite progressively in terms of different issues. So I think it's really important for these candidates to really be able to utilize trusted messengers to do outreach for their communities, to also recognize the language needs. I know currently a number of the different political PACs and campaigns are going door to door canvassing, trying to provide translated materials. API Vote and Asian American Advancing Justice Atlanta also sent out mailers, and they're following up with phone calls and text messages that are appropriate. But we also recognize that this type of effort is not done overnight. It's also about relationship building. It's about providing infrastructure and resourcing these growing API communities and ensuring that they are reached out to on a regular basis and that we turn them into regular voters. I think the last 4 years, our Georgia communities have been really active in building that infrastructure, and they had a lot of practice. They had the 2016 presidential elections, special elections, runoffs, and then Stacey Abrams, when she ran for governor, she had a pre-existing relationship with this community and had also been proactive in the inclusion of APIs as part of the expansion of the electorate in Georgia. At the same time, we can't forget the increase of APIs running for office locally. Starting in 2021, Georgia would be home to 6 AAPI state legislators as well.
That is all part of that changing demographic that we have been talking about. And with those razor-thin margins likely to take place in this runoff election, every single voter matters. Christine Chen, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.